Okay, now I'd briefly like to talk about something called the adaptive cycle, which some people working in theoretical history have found a useful mental model for looking at processes. So it describes systems that are evolving and suggests that they go in a kind of cycle with four phases that are shown here. So if we start down here with this phase of exploitation, the idea here is that there's a demand for new ideas. So there's a proliferation, a rapid proliferation of new ideas, taking up the opportunity for people calling for new ideas. So lots of ideas spread, and it's a bit like Mao Zedong, I think, said, "Let 100 flowers bloom." So that's in the exploitation phase. Lots of ideas out there, but then some of those ideas will work better than others, or some combinations of ideas will work better than others. So some ideas will be kept and others will fall by the wayside. And so you start to move into this phase of conservation, where you're focused on keeping the ideas that work best, conserving the ideas that work best, nurturing what works. Because if it works, you don't want to tinker with it, so you keep it as it is. But the trouble is that what works today doesn't necessarily work tomorrow, because the world is always changing around you, and so there's a growing gap between the world that you're optimized for and the way the world actually is, and eventually that gap between where you work well and what's actually needed to deal with the current situation is so large that you're basically dysfunctional and can't cope, and you're eventually overtaken by these problems, and at that point your system collapses. You are forced to abandon those ideas which are outmoded and no longer work. So there's a letting go or a release at this point. So you're no longer committed to those ideas, and that allows you to move into the next phase of reorganisation, which is a creative, innovative phase where you're starting to generate new ideas out of the fragments of what's left behind from the old order. And so this leads to back to the beginning, where you've now got lots of ideas, and those can then start to spread out and be tried out, and they can exploit that opportunity of a demand for new ideas, and then eventually some of those will survive and others won't, and you get back into the phase of conservation, and so it goes round. And these phases are sometimes labelled with R, K, omega and alpha. Now the terms R and K come from population ecology, models of population growth of animal populations. So there are basically two strategies that animals can adopt in reproducing themselves, which is one is just to produce lots and lots of young and hope that some of them will survive, at least a few. But the other strategy is to produce just a few young, but put a lot of parental effort into protecting and nurturing those young to make sure that they can survive until they're ready to look after themselves. So these terms R and K represent parameters in the population ecology models. R measures the tendency to produce masses of young and hope that a few survive, and K measures the amount of parental effort towards nurturing your young. So R is proliferation, exploitation of an environment, and K is conservation of a few but highly valued elements. And then This is omega, the last letter of the Greek alphabet, because it represents the end of the cycle when it's collapsed and it's reached the end of the line. It's worked out all its possibilities. So that is omega, and then you move from omega back to alpha, the first letter of the Greek alphabet. That's the beginning. So you're back at the beginning of a new cycle with new things coming in. And it's also thought that this cycle exists within two dimensions of potential and connectedness. So in the sort of front loop, as connectedness increases, potential increases, and on the back loop, as connectedness decreases, potential increases. So what that means then is that here you've got hundreds of ideas, lots and lots of ideas, and they're not coordinated in any way. But then as you select the best ones out, you develop things that work well together. So your ideas become more connected into a system that you're conserving. And also when you've got all these hundreds of new ideas, some are good, some are bad. But here all your ideas are good. So your capability is high, and your potential is high. But then once the world has sort of moved on, but you're still conserving the old order, and you collapse, then you're still connected, but you're with the old ideas, but your potential has massively decreased because of the way the world has moved on. You've got potential for a world that doesn't exist anymore. So and at that point, when the release, you then start to abandon the old ideas. Everything can fragment and the connectedness decreases, but you're now developing new ideas, some of which are good. So your potential is increasing again. And one other idea that is connected to all this is that of Panarchy, which represents the idea that this kind of cycle is happening on all scales. So it's happening to us in our individual lives. We're experiencing this kind of cycle from exploitation, conservation, release and reorganisation as we go through our own lives. But this is also happening to the society that you're part of, and maybe it's happening to the whole human species, or at least to a particular civilization that you're part of. So this adaptive cycle, you experience it in multiple ways. So that increases the richness and complexity of it. You may be at different points of the cycle on different levels.